Hey everybody, it's Boz. I thought I'd do a video about Bozmos. I just searched for it on YouTube and I saw a couple videos about my map that I made, and I thought, well, there's probably a lot of content on it, and I haven't actually made a video about it myself to talk about it and talk about my experiences with it, my experience making it, and so on. And I also watched some of Lucid's series where he played the first game on this map, um, and read some of the comments there. And I thought, rather than replying to each one, I'll because I've heard a lot of these comments before. I thought that I'll just talk about it in a video. Um, so I wrote down a bunch of questions. So that and comments that I've seen over time. And I want to answer them. So one is, what was the motivation behind making Bosmos? Um, so in general, when I play Dominions, I like large empires and managing them, building them. Where you have lots of options for what you can do. Um, there's quite rich diplomacy with other players in politics, lots of intrigue and double crossing people and alliances, coalitions, and influencing things and so on. I've All that stuff is really fun. Um, in those sort of games, when you get really big, the game tends to end. So it's kind of like you don't really get, you get really big and then you don't really get to, um, uh, how do I say, you don't get to express the um, like power of owning this empire or whatever. And then the first large game I hosted was actually on Iridia, on the Nexus server. So Iridia, if you don't know, it uh, looks like looks like this. There we are. So, um, this is like 1,000 something province map. Um, so I hosted that game on the Nexus server, and uh, that was before I got banned from Nexus, like all the cool people with a sense of humor eventually do. Um, and on in that first game that I hosted, we had about 64 players. And it was the largest game that I had hosted, and I think it was the largest game that anybody actually hosted, to my knowledge, up to that point in Dominions in general. Um, and the person that won that game was actually the whole game. It was Marverni was winning because they had free spawn uh, boars that they took in large +4, and they were just really difficult and oppressive to deal with. Um, Eventually, there was a great big coalition against them, and they didn't win. Another player won who was on this kind of western side of the map, and the game ended. And what I didn't really like about it is that because of the lack of connections, like there is some long distance connections on the map. Because yeah, it's if you start over here and to get from here to over here, it's like 20, 30 moves or something. That's not. That's just completely ridiculous. Like it takes like a month of real in real life to move units from there to here. So you need long distance connections. Um, the map didn't have enough of them, and so when some of the big players started winning, the other people that could potentially interfere with their victory just didn't have the logistics and the you know topological connections to actually do that. So I decided to make my own map with that to host another big game because that game was really fun. Being the large size, everybody gets hyped up for it, and all that kind of feeling of community and everything that you get in the minis multiplayer games was dialed up to, you know, 5, 6 times more. So I decided to make a new game, a new map with long connections, basically. Um, and this was the map. So another comment that I quite often see is that people say the game takes, these games take a huge amount of time. They actually, or they take too long to finish. They actually don't. So there, when you have large games, you must have no extensions, in my opinion. Because if you let people have extensions, then uh, you know you're gonna have someone needing an extension every day, and it's just gonna be unplayable. So you have to have no extensions for any reason. If people need an extension, they should get someone else to play their turn. Maybe someone who's on the other end of the world map, so they don't have any relationship to that player, um, or someone who's just not in the game at all. So because there's no extensions and the turns just proceed as normal, the games just finish at a normal time. The turns can take longer though if you get into the late game and you end up being absolutely huge, then the turns can take a very long time. So um, in the first Bozmos game, there was 3 players that got really big. So Lucid controlled most of Archaea. Um, Nick Knight controlled most of Gielinor, and God's Glory was mostly controlled by Aaron. Um, and I think that Valanus, Acidwood, and the other ones were kind of like battlegrounds. But each person had to. I think the turns took each person like 4 or 5 hours to do, and they'd spread them out over 3 days. So that's not really good, obviously. Like that, that's definitely not the intention. Um, but there was ways to fix that, and I added in a lot more interplanetary connections. So in the first version of Bosmos, when we played it in Bosmos 1, a lot of the extra little planets and things, I don't think that they actually existed on the map. I added them in later on to, you know, create more connectivity so people can get around a lot more. Um, yeah. Uh, but so, and in the second Bosmos game, we didn't really have that problem where one person, well, where a few people got absolutely huge. Lucid got absolutely huge in the second game, but I don't think that was really a map size problem. That was more of a connection problem because he played late age Roulia or Roulia, whatever, however you say it, and he took the yellow king pretender has 100 movement, and you see that the map, all the underwater provinces are kind of like corridors. Um, they're very strung out, so to speak, and one goes to one other province, so they're kind of like chained together. Like you can see that with Valanus, and if this was the map on itself, that wouldn't be a huge problem. But on a larger scale, when you have all these kind of chains, what happens is you have your 100 movement pretender jump across the map, take a choke point, and if there's a player that started over here, for example, and you take this province from him, you don't need to take these other 4 provinces. You can just keep this one and then jump across somewhere over here and take another province. And so by taking one province, you've secured 4. Um, and you can do the same thing in lots of other places because there's many places where there's little kind of choke points in the water. So Lucid, I think it was pretty cheesy to be honest, but whatever he played a strategy that won the game, so whatever. But that was a problem with the map that is not really easy to fix because I was using existing images, and it's very difficult to change maps in the map editor. You can create them, not too difficult, but changing them once you've made them is really really hard. Um, yes. So the other problem with these very large games is that uh, you inevitably end up with a very large range of skill levels. So the top players in the game and the bottom players in the game have a huge sort of, thousands of hours difference in experience between them, but many, many thousands of hours. And um, it, when you it becomes there's if you start in a place where you're surrounded by a bunch of people that are new to the game, then you're just gonna dominate them. And when you get to a certain point where when you come across someone who's a similar skill level to yourself, you've actually eaten a bunch of noobs, and and that other person can no longer really do anything because they just don't have the resources to compete with you. So in the second Bosmos game, we had something like we had a uh, half the people on this planet were all people that had played the game for thousands of hours, and spread across the other planets, we had most of the we had a lot of people that did not play the game very much, which was another problem. So that's something that's a bit kind of hard to solve, but I think that um, when you host these games, uh, that people come into it with this is not a tournament game. This is a casual kind of big community event kind of game, and you just need to take a big dose of chill and have good vibes. So, what have I learned um, about after hosting, one huge game on Iridia and two big games on Bosmos? So what I learned is that it's better that these games end while they're still fun, which is between turn 60 and 80, I think, is the time that, if it gets beyond turn 80, it's not gonna be fun anymore. You're gonna kind of have everything available to you, and your opponents are gonna have everything available to them, and it's just gonna become, who. It's just not gonna be fun. Um, so I think that the game settings need to be done in such a way that somebody gets a throne victory by somebody can get a throne victory by turn 60. So I'm hosting another game now, not on this map, another one. I'll show that later on. And I'm setting the throne count to 17 points, so it's not too high. But the game might feel like it ends abruptly potentially, but I think that it's better to, it's kind of like the Khabib in the UFC. It might be good if it continues, but it's better to end while it's still good and then play again rather than, play until it stops being fun, because then you don't want to play again. Um, and the last thing you remember about it is the bad ending. In the first Bosmos game, I decided to nerf all the things that screw everybody in the whole world, like Burden of Time, for example, because I didn't want someone rushing it and potentially, having multiple pop kills collaborate to do a really big Burden Time overcast, for example. So I made those spells. I removed some from the game, and it made others cost a lot more. Um, I also introduced free spawn and gem generators because I thought, well, on a large map, it kind of favors nations that can get free stuff because it just, it scales sort of exponentially. Um, but what that really did was just, it's kind of like the Spanish in South America. It just, you find lots of silver, and it created inflation and just made the game worse. So it's more fun when resources are scarce, and all the kind of mechanics that mow the grass, so to speak, um, actually make the game stay more manageable, even though it does feel quite bad. Um, Somebody read a comment that said the creator of the map doesn't believe there's too much of a good thing. No, no, there definitely is too much of a good thing. But playing with Dominions with this many people is basically just a different game that's more fun and more epic, and all the things that make Dominions good, there's more of that. There's also a lot of things that can go wrong, but between each game like this that I've hosted, I've fixed the problems of the previous game, but other problems come up. So I just keep fixing them. So what did I learn from the second Bozmos game? Um, well, introducing untested, immature mods, especially with new nations, to the game with so many people, it's kind of like being the lead singer at a concert and making up a song you've never rehearsed on the spot. Disaster is inevitable in some shape or form. It's fine to have mods that have balance issues. I think even Winter makes stuff that is unbalanced. Like most recently in Dominion 6, heroism was quite unbalanced and they've nerfed it. Um, that said, introducing mods in such large games is a recipe for disaster, and it's better to play them with smaller groups of friends and family, so to speak. The other thing I learned is that it's really hard to edit maps once they're created. Since I use existing maps like Archaea, Gielinor, Astalun, Valanus, Cause Glory, doing any balance changes to the map is extremely difficult because if I want to, for example, add more C here and remove C from here, um, it's a huge amount of painting I have to do. It's gonna be very difficult to make it not stick out from the rest of it. And there's just a whole bunch of kind of technical, artistic challenges with doing that. The other thing is that when you remove and add provinces to a map that's already created, it's quite easy to make a mistake, especially when you have this many provinces and you're changing lots of them. If you make a mistake, then you have to go back and start again, basically. It's kind of like trying to count to 1,000. If you lose track of which number you're on, then you just have to go back um, to the beginning. It feels a bit like that, and after at a certain point, it gets really old and tedious. So I just thought that I don't really want to keep editing this map because it's like putting. I started adding on all this Heroes 3 stuff, and I thought maybe if I add in a whole bunch of this Heroes 3 stuff everywhere, because there's problems like this map, for example, didn't have any visible forests on it, so I had to add some. These stick out, so I thought, well, maybe if I add Heroes 3 sprites everywhere eventually, like I did here, for example, it will kind of bring everything together because the art styles are all different. Um, but I thought after a while I just got tired of it, and I thought, this is kind of like trying to put lipstick on a pig a little bit. So what did I do the map in? I did it in Photoshop, but I've lost the original Photoshop files. I deleted them because I don't know, I was mad or trying to save space or whatever. Anyway, it was accidentally deleted them, and it made it. There's another reason why I stopped updating the map, because I don't have the Photoshop files for the latest version of it anymore, and just working with a flat image is really cringe. Why haven't you published it on Steam Workshop? Well, because I'm a fool, but I've made a new version of the map, which is much better, I think, and I'm going to publish that one on Steam Workshop. There's also another comment on Bozmos stuff is broken and flavorless. Yeah, so the first time I created the mod, I had certain ideas, and when you write a mod for the first time, it's gonna have problems with it. It's just inevitable. And it was the first mod that I've ever done for Dominions. Um, the problem is that when it goes in a large game and it gets uploaded on YouTube, it's kind of like any any mistakes or whatever that I made, because it was the first time I made a mod. Um, and it becomes like permanent essentially, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, lessons learned. What goes on the internet stays there forever, and yeah, it's worth remembering that for whoever's watching this. Um, so after this Bosmos One dumpster fire map, I made a new version from scratch, um, using lots of Mid-Journey and lots of Photoshop and painting. So I use Mid-Journey to generate all these planets and played around with the prompts extensively to get them to look uh, cohesive and kind of have that sort of fantasy map kind of look to them, but also sort of look like planets and kind of flat, kind of not flat. Um, I added, uh, generated lots of space nebulas and blended them together. There's lots of just painting to get it all to come together. I think this map it has water provinces as well, but I've got so much hatred for water nations now after uh, Bosmod, Bosmos 2, that this map basically pretty much has like all the water provinces here and here all sort of connect to each other, and these ones, I don't think there's any water starts on this planet from memory. And all these ones are connected to each other, and um, if people want to go from the water planets to these other ones, they have to go through the land. So there's no real, easy way to jump from, from the water in one planet to another planet. You have to go through the land. With the exception of this sort of connection here, like this, the whole water section here is one cycle. So um, I think this map looks much better than the other one. I think it's quite obvious that it looks a lot better. The style of the map is pretty consistent. It's got a lot of nice things going for it, and I'm quite happy with the way that this one turned out. I hope that it's fun. I'm going to be hosting a game with it. It's a 80-player map. So I'm hosting a game right now with 80 players on this one. I'll make a YouTube series on it, and I'll publish it to Steam Workshop tomorrow. That's my pledge, and